Hello, YouTube viewers. Dave here. As a reminder, these the Bible study guide that I'm presenting. The program itself is not owned by me. I am not taking credit for the audible portion of it. This is the Holy Bible of the New King James Version of the Old Testament and the New Testament. But it is a program that helps me help you understand of how the Bible was translated. And as a reminder again, this is not my program. I am just here to spread the word of God to the inhabitants of the world. And we will continue with chapter 28 of Genesis.
Chapter 28. So Isaac called for Jacob, blessed him, and said,
"Do not marry any of these Canaanite women. Instead, go at once to Padan Aram, to the house of your grandfather Bethuel, and marry one of your uncle Laban's daughters. May God Almighty bless you and give you many children, and may your descendants become a great assembly of nations. May God pass on to you and your descendants the blessings he promised to Abraham. May you own this land where we now are foreigners, for God gave it to Abraham."
So Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padan Aram to stay with his uncle Laban, his mother's brother, the son of Bethuel the Aramean. Esau heard that his father had blessed Jacob and sent him to Padan Aram to find a wife, and that he had warned Jacob not to marry a Canaanite woman. He also knew that Jacob had obeyed his parents and gone to Padan Aram. It was now very clear to Esau that his father despised the local Canaanite women. So he visited his uncle Ishmael's family and married one of Ishmael's daughters, in addition to the wives he already had. His new wife's name was Mahalath. She was the sister of Nebaioth and the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son. Meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba and traveled toward Haran. At sundown he arrived at a good place to set up camp and stopped there for the night. Jacob found a stone for a pillow and lay down to sleep. As he slept, he dreamed of a stairway that reached from earth to heaven, and he saw the angels of God going up and down on it. At the top of the stairway stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. The ground you are lying on belongs to you. I will give it to you and your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. They will cover the land from east to west and from north to south. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. What's more, I will be with you, and I will protect you wherever you go. I will someday bring you safely back to this land. I will be with you constantly until I have finished giving you everything I have promised." Then Jacob woke up and said,
"Surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it."
He was afraid and said,
"What an awesome place this is! It is none other than the house of God, the gateway to heaven."
The next morning he got up very early. He took the stone he had used as a pillow and set it upright as a memorial pillar. Then he poured olive oil over it. He named the place Bethel, House of God, though the name of the nearby village was Luz. Then Jacob made this vow,
"If God will be with me and protect me on this journey, and give me food and clothing, and if he will bring me back safely to my father, then I will make the Lord my God. This memorial pillar will become a place for worshiping God, and I will give God 1/10 of everything he gives me."
Chapter 29. Jacob hurried on, finally arriving in the land of the east. He saw in the distance 3 flocks of sheep lying in an open field beside a well, waiting to be watered. But a heavy stone covered the mouth of the well. It was the custom there to wait for all the flocks to arrive before removing the stone. After watering them, the stone would be rolled back over the mouth of the well. Jacob went over to the shepherds and asked them,
"Where do you live? At Haran.
they said.
Do you know a man there named Laban, the grandson of Nahor?
Yes, we do.
They replied.
How is he?
Jacob asked.
He's well and prosperous. Look, here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep.
Why don't you water the flock so they can get back to grazing?
Jacob asked.
They'll be hungry if you stop so early in the day.
We don't roll away the stone and begin the watering until all the flocks and shepherds are here.
They replied. As this conversation was going on, Rachel arrived with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherd. And because she was his cousin, the daughter of his mother's brother, and because the sheep were his uncle's, Jacob went over to the well and rolled away the stone and watered his uncle's flock. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and tears came to his eyes. He explained that he was her cousin on her father's side, her aunt Rebekah's son. So Rachel quickly ran and told her father Laban. As soon as Laban heard about Jacob's arrival, he rushed out to meet him and greeted him warmly. Laban then brought him home, and Jacob told him his story.
"Just think, my very own flesh and blood!"
Laban exclaimed. After Jacob had been there about a month, Laban said to him,
"You shouldn't work for me without pay just because we are relatives. How much do you want?"
Now Laban had 2 daughters, Leah, who was the oldest, and her younger sister Rachel. Leah had pretty eyes, but Rachel was beautiful in every way, with a lovely face and shapely figure. Since Jacob was in love with Rachel, he told her father,
I'll work for you 7 years if you'll give me Rachel, your younger daughter, as my wife.
"Agreed."
Laban replied.
"I'd rather give it to you than to someone outside the family."
So Jacob spent the next 7 years working to pay for Rachel. But his love for her was so strong that it seemed to him but a few days. Finally, the time came for him to marry her.
I have fulfilled my contract,
Jacob said to Laban.
Now give me my wife so we can be married.
So Laban invited everyone in the neighborhood to celebrate with Jacob at a wedding feast. That night, when it was dark, Laban took Leah to Jacob, and he slept with her. And Laban gave Leah a servant, Zilpah, to be her maid. But when Jacob woke up in the morning, it was Leah.
What sort of trick is this?
Jacob raged at Laban.
I worked 7 years for Rachel. What do you mean by this trickery?
"It's not our custom to marry off a younger daughter ahead of the firstborn."
Laban replied.
"Wait until the bridal week is over, and you can have Rachel too. That is, if you promise to work another 7 years for me."
So Jacob agreed to work 7 more years. A week after Jacob had married Leah, Laban gave him Rachel too. And Laban gave Rachel a servant, Bilhah, to be her maid. So Jacob slept with Rachel too, and he loved her more than Leah. He then stayed and worked the additional 7 years. But because Leah was unloved, the Lord let her have a child, while Rachel was childless. So Leah became pregnant and had a son. She named him Reuben, for she said,
"The Lord has noticed my misery, and now my husband will love me."
She soon became pregnant again and had another son. She named him Simeon, for she said,
"The Lord heard that I was unloved, and has given me another son."
Again she became pregnant and had a son. She named him Levi, for she said,
"Surely now my husband will feel affection for me, since I have given him 3 sons."
Once again she became pregnant and had a son. She named him Judah, for she said,
"Now I will praise the Lord."
And then she stopped having children. Chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she wasn't having any children, she became jealous of her sister.
"Give me children, or I'll die!"
she exclaimed to Jacob. Jacob flew into a rage.
Am I God?
He asked.
He is the only one able to give you children.
Then Rachel told him.
"Sleep with my servant Bilhah, and she will bear children for me."
So Rachel gave him Bilhah to be his wife, and Jacob slept with her. Bilhah became pregnant and presented him with a son. Rachel named him Dan, for she said,
"God has vindicated me. He has heard my request and given me a son."
Then Bilhah became pregnant again and gave Jacob a second son. Rachel named him Naphtali, for she said,
"I have had an intense struggle with my sister, and I am winning."
Meanwhile, Leah realized that she wasn't getting pregnant any more, so she gave her servant Zilpah to Jacob to be his wife. Soon Zilpah presented him with another son. Leah named him Gad, for she said,
"How fortunate I am!"
Then Zilpah produced a second son, and Leah named him Asher, for she said,
"What joy is mine! The other women will consider me happy indeed."
One day during the wheat harvest, Reuben found some mandrakes growing in a field and brought the roots to his mother Leah. Rachel begged Leah to give some of them to her, but Leah angrily replied,
"Wasn't it enough that you stole my husband? Now will you steal my son's mandrake roots too?"
Rachel said,
I will let him sleep with you tonight in exchange for the mandrake roots.
So that evening, as Jacob was coming home from the fields, Leah went out to meet him.
"You must sleep with me tonight.
She said,
I have paid for you with some mandrake roots my son has found."
So Jacob slept with her. And God answered her prayers. She became pregnant again and gave birth to her fifth son. She named him Issachar, for she said,
"God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband as a wife."
Then she became pregnant again and had a sixth son. She named him Zebulun, for she said,
"God has given me good gifts for my husband. Now he will honor me, for I have given him 6 sons."
Later she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel's plight and answered her prayers by giving her a child. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son.
God has removed my shame.
She said, and she named him Joseph, for she said,
May the Lord give me yet another son.
Soon after Joseph was born to Rachel, Jacob said to Laban,
I want to go back home. Let me take my wives and children, for I have earned them from you. And let me be on my way. You know I have fully paid for them with my service to you.
Please, don't leave me.
Laban replied,
For I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because you are here. How much do I owe you? Whatever it is, I'll pay it.
Jacob replied,
You know how faithfully I have served you through these many years, and how your flocks and herds have grown. You had little indeed before I came, and your wealth has increased enormously. The Lord has blessed you from everything I do. But now, what about me? When should I provide for my own family?
What wages do you want?
Laban asked again. Jacob replied,
Don't give me anything at all. Just do one thing, and I'll go back to work for you. Let me go out among your flocks today and remove all the sheep and goats that are speckled or spotted, along with all the dark-colored sheep. Give them to me as my wages. This will make it easy for you to see whether or not I have been honest. If you find in my flock any white sheep or goats that are not speckled, you will know that I have stolen them from you.
All right,
Laban replied.
It will be as you have said.
But that very day Laban went out and removed all the male goats that were speckled and spotted, the females that were speckled and spotted with any white patches, and all the dark-colored sheep. He placed them in the care of his sons, and they took them 3 days' distance from where Jacob was. Meanwhile, Jacob stayed and cared for Laban's flock. Now Jacob took fresh shoots from poplar, almond, and plane trees, and peeled off strips of the bark to make white streaks on them. Then he set up these peeled branches beside the watering trough, so Laban's flocks would see them as they came to drink, for that was when they mated. So when the flocks mated in front of the white-streaked branches, all of their offspring were streaked, speckled, and spotted. Jacob added them to his own flock, thus separating the lambs from Laban's flock. Then at mating time he turned the flocks toward the streaked and dark-colored rams in Laban's flock. This is how he built his flock from Laban's. Whenever the stronger females were ready to mate, Jacob set up the peeled branches in front of them. But he didn't do this with the weaker ones. So the weaker lambs belonged to Laban, and the stronger ones were Jacob's. As a result, Jacob's flocks increased rapidly, and he became very wealthy, with many servants, camels, and donkeys. Chapter 31. But Jacob soon learned that Laban's sons were beginning to grumble.
Jacob has robbed our father,
They said.
All his wealth has been gained at our father's expense.
And Jacob began to notice a considerable cooling in Laban's attitude toward him. Then the Lord said to Jacob, Return to the land of your father and grandfather and to your relatives there, and I will be with you. Jacob called Rachel and Leah out to the field where he was watching the flocks, so he could talk things over with them.
Your father has turned against me and is not treating me like he used to,
He told them.
But the God of my father has been with me. You know how hard I have worked for your father, But he has tricked me, breaking his wage agreement with me again and again. But God has not allowed him to do me any harm. For if he said the speckled animals were mine, the whole flock began to produce speckled lambs. And when he changed his mind and said I could have the streaked ones, then all the lambs were born streaked. In this way, God has made me wealthy at your father's expense. During the mating season, I had a dream, and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then, in my dream, the angel of God said to me, "Jacob?" And I replied, "Yes, I'm listening." The angel said, "Look, and you will see that only the streaked, speckled, and spotted males are mating with the females of your flock. For I have seen all that Laban has done to you. I am the God you met at Bethel, the place where you anointed the pillar of stone and made a vow to serve me. Now leave this country and return to the land you came from."
Rachel and Leah said,
That's fine with us. There's nothing for us here. None of our father's wealth will come to us anyway.
He has reduced our rights to those of foreign women. He sold us, and what he received for us has disappeared.
The riches God has given you from our father are legally ours and our children's to begin with.
So go ahead and do whatever God has told you.
So Jacob put his wives and children on camels, and drove the flocks in front of him, all the livestock he had acquired at Padan Aram, and set out on his journey to the land of Canaan, where his father Isaac lived. At the time they left, Laban was some distance away shearing his sheep. Rachel stole her father's household gods and took them with her. They set out secretly and never told Laban they were leaving. Jacob took all his possessions with him and crossed the Euphrates River, heading for the territory of Gilead. Laban didn't learn of their flight for 3 days, but when he did, he gathered a group of his relatives and set out in hot pursuit. He caught up with them 7 days later in the hill country of Gilead. But the previous night God had appeared to Laban in a dream. "Be careful about what you say to Jacob," he was told. So when Laban caught up with Jacob as he was camped in the hill country of Gilead, he set up his camp not far from Jacob's.
What do you mean by speaking off like this?
Laban demanded.
Are my daughters prisoners, the plunder of war, that you have stolen them away like this? Why did you slip away secretly? I would have given you a farewell party with joyful singing accompanied by tambourines and harps. Why didn't you let me kiss my daughters and grandchildren and tell them goodbye? You have acted very foolishly. I could destroy you, but the God of your father appeared to me last night and told me, "Be careful about what you say to Jacob." I know you feel you must go, and you long intensely for your childhood home, but why have you stolen my household gods?
I rushed away because I was afraid,
Jacob answered.
I said to myself, "He'll take his daughters from me by force. But as for your household gods, let the person who has taken them die. If you find anything that belongs to you, I swear before all these relatives of ours, I will give it back without question."
But Jacob didn't know that Rachel had taken them. Laban went first into Jacob's tent to search there, then into Leah's, and then he searched the tents of the 2 concubines, but he didn't find the gods. Finally, he went into Rachel's tent. Rachel had taken the household gods and had stuffed them into her camel saddle, and now she was sitting on them. So although Laban searched all the tents, he couldn't find them.
Forgive my not getting up, Father.
Rachel explained.
I'm having my monthly period.
So despite his thorough search, Laban didn't find them. Then Jacob became very angry.
"What did you find?"
he demanded of Laban.
"What is my crime? You have chased me as though I were a criminal. You have searched through everything I own. Now show me what you have found that belongs to you. Set it out here in front of us before our relatives for all to see. Let them decide who is the real owner. 20 years I have been with you, and all that time I cared for your sheep and goats so they produced healthy offspring. In all those years I never touched a single ram of yours for food. If any were attacked and killed by wild animals, did I show them to you and ask you to reduce the count of your flocks? No, I took the loss. You made me pay for every animal stolen from the flocks, whether the loss was my fault or not. I worked for you through the scorching heat of the day, and through cold and sleepless nights. Yes, 20 years, 14 of them earning your 2 daughters, and 6 years to get the flock. And you have reduced my wages 10 times. In fact, except for the grace of God, the God of my grandfather Abraham, the awe-inspiring God of my father Isaac, you would have sent me off without a penny to my name. But God has seen your cruelty and my hard work. That is why he appeared to you last night and vindicated me.
Then Laban replied to Jacob,
These women are my daughters, and these children are my grandchildren, and these flocks and all that you have, all are mine. But what can I do now to my own daughters and grandchildren? Come now, and we will make a peace treaty, you and I, and we will live by its terms.
So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a monument. He also told his men to gather stones and pile them up in a heap. Jacob and Laban then sat down beside the pile of stones to share a meal. They named it Witness Pile, which is Jigar Sahadutha in Laban's language and Galid in Jacob's.
This pile of stones will stand as a witness to remind us of our agreement.
Laban said. This place was also called Mizpah, for Laban said,
May the Lord keep watch between us, to make sure that we keep this treaty when we are out of each other's sight. I won't know about it if you are harsh to my daughters, or if you take other wives, but God will see it. This heap of stones and this pillar stand between us as a witness of our vows. I will not cross this line to harm you, and you will not cross it to harm me. I call on the God of our ancestors, the God of your grandfather Abraham, and the God of my grandfather Nahor, to punish either one of us who harms the other.
So Jacob took an oath before the awesome God of his father, Isaac, to respect the boundary line. Then Jacob presented a sacrifice to God and invited everyone to a feast. Afterward they spent the night there in the hills. Laban got up early the next morning, and he kissed his daughters and grandchildren and blessed them. Then he returned home. Chapter 32. As Jacob and his household started on their way again, angels of God came to meet him. When Jacob saw them, he exclaimed,
This is God's camp.
So he named the place Mahanaim. Jacob now sent messengers to his brother Esau in Edom, the land of Seir. He told them,
Give this message to my master Esau. Humble greetings from your servant Jacob. I have been living with Uncle Laban until recently, and now I own oxen, donkeys, sheep, goats, and many servants, both men and women. I have sent these messengers to inform you of my coming, hoping that you will be friendly to us.
The messengers returned with the news that Esau was on his way to meet Jacob, with an army of 400 men. Jacob was terrified at the news. He divided his household, along with the flocks and herds and camels, into 2 camps. He thought,
If Esau attacks one group, perhaps the other can escape.
Then Jacob prayed,
O God of my grandfather Abraham and my father Isaac, O Lord, you told me to return to my land and to my relatives, and you promised to treat me kindly. I am not worthy of all the faithfulness and unfailing love you have shown to me, your servant. When I left home, I owned nothing except a walking stick, and now my household fills 2 camps. O Lord, please rescue me from my brother Esau. I am afraid that he is coming to kill me, along with my wives and children. But you promised to treat me kindly, and to multiply my descendants until they became as numerous as the sands along the seashore, too many to count.
Jacob stayed where he was for the night, and prepared a present for Esau, 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. He told his servants to lead them on ahead, each group of animals by itself, separated by a distance in between. He gave these instructions to the men leading the first group.
When you meet Esau, he will ask, Where are you going? Whose servants are you? Whose animals are these? You should reply, These belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present for his master Esau. He is coming right behind us.
Jacob gave the same instructions to each of the herdsmen and told them,
You are all to say the same thing to Esau when you see him, and be sure to say, 'Your servant Jacob is right behind us.'"
Jacob's plan was to appease Esau with the presents before meeting him face to face.
Perhaps,
Jacob hoped.
he will be friendly to us.
So the presents were sent on ahead, and Jacob spent that night in the camp. But during the night Jacob got up and sent his 2 wives, 2 concubines, and 11 sons across the Jabbok River. After they were on the other side, he sent over all his possessions. This left Jacob all alone in the camp. And a man came and wrestled with him until dawn. When the man saw that he couldn't win the match, he struck Jacob's hip and knocked it out of joint at the socket. Then the man said,
"Let me go, for it is dawn."
But Jacob panted.
"I will not let you go unless you bless me."
"What is your name?"
The man asked. He replied,
"Jacob."
"Your name will no longer be Jacob.
The man told him.
It is now Israel, because you have struggled with both God and men and have won."
"What is your name?"
Jacob asked him.
"Why do you ask?"
The man replied. Then he blessed Jacob there. Jacob named the place Peniel, face of God, for he said,
"I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared."
The sun rose as he left Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. That is why even today the people of Israel don't eat meat from near the hip, in memory of what happened that night. Chapter 33. Then in the distance Jacob saw Esau coming with his 400 men. Jacob now arranged his family into a column, with his 2 concubines and their children at the front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then Jacob went on ahead. As he approached his brother, he bowed low 7 times before him. Then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him affectionately and kissed him. Both of them were in tears. Then Esau looked at the women and children and asked,
"Who are these people with you?"
"These are the children God has graciously given to me."
Jacob replied. Then the concubines came forward with their children and bowed low before him. Next Leah came with her children, and they bowed down. Finally Rachel and Joseph came and made their bows.
"And what were all their flocks and herds I met as I came?"
Esau asked. Jacob replied,
"They are gifts, my lord, to ensure your goodwill."
"Brother, I have plenty."
Esau answered.
"Keep what you have."
"No, please accept them.
Jacob said,
For what a relief it is to see your friendly smile. It is like seeing the smile of God. Please take my gifts, for God has been very generous to me. I have more than enough."
Jacob continued to insist, so Esau finally accepted them.
"Well, let's be going,"
Esau said.
"I will stay with you and lead the way."
But Jacob replied,
"You can see, my lord, that some of the children are very young, and the flocks and herds have their young too. If they are driven too hard, they may die. So go on ahead of us. We will follow at our own pace and meet you at Seir."
"Well,
Esau said,
at least let me leave you some of my men to guide and protect you."
"There is no reason for you to be so kind to me."
Jacob insisted. So Esau started back to Seir that same day. Meanwhile, Jacob and his household traveled on to Succoth. There he built himself a house and made shelters for his flocks and herds. That is why the place was named Succoth. Then they arrived safely at Shechem in Canaan, and they set up camp just outside the town. Jacob bought the land he camped on from the family of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of silver. And there he built an altar and called it El Elohi Israel. Chapter 34. One day Dinah, Leah's daughter, went to visit some of the young women who lived in the area. But when the local prince, Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, saw her, he took her and raped her. But Shechem's love for Dinah was strong, and he tried to win her affection. He even spoke to his father about it.
"Get this girl for me,"
he demanded.
"I want to marry her."
Word soon reached Jacob that his daughter had been defiled, but his sons were out in the fields herding cattle, so he did nothing until they returned. Meanwhile, Hamor, Shechem's father, came out to discuss the matter with Jacob. He arrived just as Jacob's sons were coming in from the fields. They were shocked and furious that their sister had been raped. Shechem had done a disgraceful thing against Jacob's family, a thing that should never have been done. Hamor told Jacob and his sons,
My son Shechem is truly in love with your daughter, and he longs for her to be his wife. Please let him marry her. We invite you to let your daughters marry our sons, and we will give our daughters as wives for your young men, and you may live among us. The land is open to you. Settle here and trade with us. You are free to acquire property among us."
Then Shechem addressed Dinah's father and brothers.
Please be kind to me, and let me have her as my wife,
he begged.
"I will give whatever you require. No matter what dowry or gift you demand, I will pay it. Only give me the girl as my wife."
But Dinah's brothers deceived Shechem and Hamor because of what Shechem had done to their sister. They said to them,
"We couldn't possibly allow this because you aren't circumcised. It would be a disgrace for her to marry a man like you. But here is a solution. If every man among you will be circumcised like we are, we will intermarry with you and live here and unite with you to become one people. Otherwise, we will take her and be on our way."
Hamor and Shechem gladly agreed, and Shechem lost no time in acting on this request, for he wanted Dinah desperately. Shechem was a highly respected member of his family, and he appeared with his father before the town leaders to present this proposal.
"Those men are our friends,"
they said.
"Let's invite them to live here among us and ply their trade, for the land is large enough to hold them, and we can intermarry with them. But they will consider staying here only on one condition. Every one of us men must be circumcised, just as they are. But if we do this, all their flocks and possessions will become ours. Come, let's agree to this so they will settle here among us."
So all the men agreed and were circumcised. But 3 days later, when their wounds were still sore, 2 of Dinah's brothers, Simeon and Levi, took their swords, entered the town without opposition, and slaughtered every man there, including Hamor and Shechem. They rescued Dinah from Shechem's house and returned to their camp. Then all of Jacob's sons plundered the town because their sister had been defiled there. They seized all the flocks and herds and donkeys, everything they could lay their hands on, both inside the town and outside in the fields. They also took all the women and children and wealth of every kind. Afterward Jacob said to Levi and Simeon,
"You have made me stink among all the people of this land, among all the Canaanites and Perizzites. We are so few that they will come and crush us. We will all be killed."
"Should he treat our sister like a prostitute?"
they retorted angrily. Chapter 35. God said to Jacob, "Now move on to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar there to worship me, the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." So Jacob told everyone in his household,
"Destroy your idols, wash yourselves, and put on clean clothing. We are now going to Bethel, where I will build an altar to the God who answered my prayers when I was in distress. He has stayed with me wherever I have gone."
So they gave Jacob all their idols and their earrings, and he buried them beneath the tree near Shechem. When they set out again, terror from God came over the people in all the towns of that area, and no one attacked them. Finally they arrived at Luz, now called Bethel, in Canaan. Jacob built an altar there and named it El Bethel, because God had appeared to him there at Bethel when he was fleeing from Esau. Soon after this, Rebekah's old nurse, Deborah, died. She was buried beneath the oak tree in the valley below Bethel. Ever since, the tree has been called the Oak of Weeping. God appeared to Jacob once again when he arrived at Bethel after traveling from Padan Aram. God blessed him and said, "Your name is no longer Jacob, you will now be called Israel." Then God said, "I am God Almighty. Multiply and fill the earth. Become a great nation, even many nations. Kings will be among your descendants, and I will pass on to you the land I gave to Abraham and Isaac. Yes, I will give it to you and your descendants." Then God went up from the place where he had spoken to Jacob. Jacob set up a stone pillar to mark the place where God had spoken to him. He then poured wine over it as an offering to God, and anointed the pillar with olive oil. Jacob called the place Bethel, house of God, because God had spoken to him there. Leaving Bethel, they traveled on toward Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. But Rachel's pains of childbirth began while they were still some distance away. After a very hard delivery, the midwife finally exclaimed,
"Don't be afraid, you have another son."
Rachel was about to die, but with her last breath she named him Ben-Onai. The baby's father, however, called him Benjamin. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. Jacob set up a stone monument over her grave, and it can be seen there to this day. Jacob then traveled on and camped beyond the Tower of Edir. While he was there, Reuben slept with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and someone told Jacob about it. These are the names of the 12 sons of Jacob. The sons of Leah were Reuben, Jacob's oldest son, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's servant, were Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Zilpah, Leah's servant, were Gad and Asher. These were the sons born to Jacob at Padan Aram. So Jacob came home to his father Isaac in Mamre, which is near Kiriath Arba, now called Hebron, where Abraham had also lived. Isaac lived for 180 years, and he died at a ripe old age, joining his ancestors in death. Then his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. Chapter 36. This is the history of the descendants of Esau, also known as Edom. Esau married 2 young women from Canaan, Adah, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite, and Aholibamah, the daughter of Anna, and granddaughter of Zibeon the Hivite. He also married his cousin Basemath, who was the daughter of Ishmael and the sister of Nebaioth. Esau and Adah had a son named Eliphaz. Esau and Basemath had a son named Reuel. Esau and Aholibamah had sons named Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. All these sons were born to Esau in the land of Canaan. Then Esau took his wives, children, household servants, cattle, and flocks, all the wealth he had gained in the land of Canaan, and moved away from his brother Jacob. There was not enough land to support them both because of all their cattle and livestock. So Esau, also known as Edom, settled in the hill country of Seir. This is a list of Esau's descendants, the Edomites who lived in the hill country of Seir. Among Esau's sons were Eliphaz, the son of Esau's wife Adah, and Reuel, the son of Esau's wife Basemath. The sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. Eliphaz had another son named Amalek, born to Timnah, his concubine. These were all grandchildren of Esau's wife Adah. The sons of Reuel were Nechath, Zerah, Shammah, and Misa. These were all grandchildren of Esau's wife Basemath. Esau also had sons through Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, and granddaughter of Zibeon. Their names were Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. Esau's children and grandchildren became the leaders of different clans. The sons of Esau's oldest son, Eliphaz, became the leaders of the clans of Teman, Omar, Zepho, Kenaz, Korah, Gatam, and Amalek. These clans in the land of Edom were descended from Eliphaz, the son of Esau, and Adah. The sons of Esau's son, Reuel, became the leaders of the clans of Nechath, Zerah, Shammah, and Misa. These clans in the land of Edom were descended from Reuel, the son of Esau and Basemath. The sons of Esau and his wife Aholibamah became the leaders of the clans of Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. These are the clans descended from Esau's wife Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah. These are all the clans descended from Esau, also known as Edom. These are the names of the tribes that descended from Seir the Horite, one of the families native to the land of Seir: Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah, Dishon, Ezer, and Dishan. These were the Horite clans, the descendants of Seir, who lived in the land of Edom. The sons of Lotan were Horai and Heman. Lotan's sister was named Timnah. The sons of Shobal were Alvan, Manahath, Ebal, Shepho, and Onam. The sons of Zibeon were Aiah and Anah. This is the Anah who discovered the hot springs in the wilderness while he was grazing his father's donkeys. The son of Anah was Dishon, and Aholibamah was his daughter. The sons of Dishon were Hemdan, Eshban, Ithran, and Kiran. The sons of Ezer were Bilhan, Zaavan, and Akan. The sons of Dishon were Uz and Aran. So the leaders of the Horite clans were Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Ena, Dishon, Ezer, and Dishan. The Horite clans are named after their clan leaders who lived in the land of Seir. These are the kings who ruled in Edom before there were kings in Israel. Bela, son of Beor, who ruled from his city of Dinhabah. When Bela died, Jobab, son of Zerah from Bozrah, became king. When Jobab died, Husham from the land of the Temanites became king. When Husham died, Hadad, son of Bedad, became king and ruled from the city of Avith. He was the one who destroyed the Midianite army in the land of Moab. When Hadad died, Samlah from the city of Masrekah became king. When Samlah died, Shaul from the city of Rehoboth on the Euphrates River became king. When Shaul died, Baal-Hanan, son of Achbor, became king. When Baal-Hanan died, Hadad became king and ruled from the city of Pau. Hadad's wife was Mehetabel, the daughter of Matred and granddaughter of Mezahab. These are the leaders of the clans of Esau, who lived in the places named for them: Timnah, Alva, Jeheth, Oholibamah, Elah, Pinon, Kenaz, Teman, Mibzar, Magdiel, and Iram. These are the names of the clans of Esau, the ancestor of the Edomites, each clan giving its name to the area it occupied. Chapter 37. So Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived. This is the history of Jacob's family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks with his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Now Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children, because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day he gave Joseph a special gift, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because of their father's partiality. They couldn't say a kind word to him. One night Joseph had a dream, and promptly reported the details to his brothers, causing them to hate him even more.
"Listen to this dream,"
he announced.
"We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. My bundle stood up, and then your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before it."
So you are going to be our king, are you?
His brothers taunted, and they hated him all the more for his dream and what he had said. Then Joseph had another dream and told his brothers about it.
"Listen to this dream,"
he said.
"The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me."
This time he told his father as well as his brothers, and his father rebuked him.
"What do you mean?"
his father asked.
"Will your mother, your brothers, and I actually come and bow before you?"
But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father gave it some thought and wondered what it all meant. Soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. When they had been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph,
"Your brothers are over at Shechem with the flocks. I'm going to send you to them."
"I'm ready to go,"
Joseph replied.
"Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are getting along,"
Jacob said.
"Then come back and bring me word."
So Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph traveled to Shechem from his home in the valley of Hebron. When he arrived there, a man noticed him wandering around the countryside.
"What are you looking for?"
he asked.
"For my brothers and their flocks."
Joseph replied.
"Have you seen them?"
"Yes."
The man told him.
"But they're no longer here. I heard your brothers say they were going to Dothan."
So Joseph followed his brothers to Dothan and found them there. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance and made plans to kill him.
"Here comes that dreamer,"
they exclaimed.
"Come on, let's kill him and throw him into a deep pit. We can tell our father that a wild animal has eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of all his dreams."
But Reuben came to Joseph's rescue.
"Let's not kill him,"
he said.
"Why should we shed his blood? Let's just throw him alive into this pit here. That way he will die without our having to touch him."
Reuben was secretly planning to help Joseph escape, and then he would bring him back to his father. So when Joseph arrived, they pulled off his beautiful robe and threw him into the pit. This pit was normally used to store water, but it was empty at the time. Then, just as they were sitting down to eat, they noticed a caravan of camels in the distance coming toward them. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders, taking spices, balm, and myrrh from Gilead to Egypt. Judah said to the others,
"What can we gain by killing our brother? That would just give us a guilty conscience. Let's sell Joseph to those Ishmaelite traders. Let's not be responsible for his death. After all, he is our brother.
And his brothers agreed. So when the traders came by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver, and the Ishmaelite traders took him along to Egypt. Some time later Reuben returned to get Joseph out of the pit. When he discovered that Joseph was missing, he tore his clothes in anguish and frustration. Then he went back to his brothers and lamented,
"The boy is gone. What can I do now?"
Then Joseph's brothers killed a goat and dipped the robe in its blood. They took the beautiful robe to their father and asked him to identify it.
"We found this in the field,"
they told him.
"It's Joseph's robe, isn't it?"
Their father recognized it at once.
"Yes,"
he said,
"it is my son's robe. A wild animal has attacked and eaten him. Surely Joseph has been torn in pieces."
Then Jacob tore his clothes and put on sackcloth. He mourned deeply for his son for many days. His family all tried to comfort him, but it was no use.
"I will die in mourning for my son,"
he would say, and then begin to weep. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the traders sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Potiphar was captain of the palace guard. Chapter 38. About this time Judah left home and moved to Adullam, where he visited a man named Hira. There he met a Canaanite woman, the daughter of Shua, and he married her. She became pregnant and had a son, and Judah named the boy Then Judah's wife had another son, and she named him Onan. And when she had a third son, she named him Shelah. At the time of Shelah's birth, they were living in Chezib. When his oldest son, grew up, Judah arranged his marriage to a young woman named Tamar. But was a wicked man in the Lord's sight, so the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to brother Onan,
"You must marry Tamar, as our law requires of the brother of a man who has died. Her first son from you will be your brother's heir."
But Onan was not willing to have a child who would not be his own heir. So whenever he had intercourse with Tamar, he spilled the semen on the ground to keep her from having a baby who would belong to his brother. But the Lord considered it a wicked thing for Onan to deny a child to his dead brother, so the Lord took Onan's life too. Then Judah told Tamar, his daughter-in-law, not to marry again at that time, but to return to her parents' home. She was to remain a widow until his youngest son, Shelah, was old enough to marry her. But Judah didn't really intend to do this because he was afraid Shelah would also die like his two brothers. So Tamar went home to her parents. In the course of time, Judah's wife died. After the time of mourning was over, Judah and his friend Hira the Adullamite went to Timnah to supervise the shearing of his sheep. Someone told Tamar that her father-in-law had left for the sheep shearing at Timnah. Tamar was aware that Shelah had grown up, but they had not called her to come and marry him. So she changed out of her widow's clothing and covered herself with a veil to disguise herself. Then she sat beside the road at the entrance to the village of Enaim, which is on the way to Timnah. Judah noticed her as he went by and thought she was a prostitute, since her face was veiled. So he stopped and propositioned her to sleep with him, not realizing that she was his own daughter-in-law.
"How much will you pay me?"
Tamar asked.
"I'll send you a young goat from my flock,"
Judah promised.
"What pledge will you give me so I can be sure you will send it to me?"
she asked.
"Well, what do you want?"
he inquired. She replied,
"I want your identification seal, your cord, and the walking stick you are carrying."
So Judah gave these items to her. She then let him sleep with her, and she became pregnant. Afterward she went home, took off her veil, and put on her widow's clothing as usual. Judah asked his friend Hira the Adullamite to take the young goat back to her and to pick up the pledges he had given her, but Hira couldn't find her. So he asked the men who lived there,
"Where can I find the prostitute who was sitting beside the road at the entrance to the village?"
"We've never had a prostitute here,"
they replied. So Hira returned to Judah and told him that he couldn't find her anywhere, and that the men of the village had claimed they didn't have a prostitute there.
"Then let her keep the pledges,"
Judah exclaimed.
"We tried our best to send her the goat. We'd be the laughing stock of the village if we went back again."
About 3 months later, Word reached Judah that Tamar, his daughter-in-law, was pregnant as a result of prostitution.
"Bring her out and burn her,"
Judah shouted. But as they were taking her out to kill her, she sent this message to her father-in-law.
The man who owns this identification seal and walking stick is the father of my child. Do you recognize them?
Judah admitted that they were his and said,
"She is more in the right than I am, because I didn't keep my promise to let her marry my son Shelah."
But Judah never slept with Tamar again. In due season, the time of Tamar's delivery arrived, and she had twin sons. As they were being born, one of them reached out his hand, and the midwife tied a scarlet thread around the wrist of the child who appeared first, saying,
"This one came out first."
But then he drew back his hand, and the other baby was actually the first to be born.
"What?"
the midwife exclaimed.
"How did you break out first?"
And ever after he was called Perez. Then the baby with the scarlet thread on his wrist was born, and he was named Zerah. Chapter 39. Now when Joseph arrived in Egypt with the Ishmaelite traders, he was purchased by Potiphar, a member of the personal staff of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Potiphar was the captain of the palace guard. The Lord was with Joseph and blessed him greatly as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. So Joseph naturally became quite a favorite with him. Potiphar soon put Joseph in charge of his entire household and entrusted him with all his business dealings. From the day Joseph was put in charge, the Lord began to bless Potiphar for Joseph's sake. All his household affairs began to run smoothly, and his crops and livestock flourished. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't have a worry in the world, except to decide what he wanted to eat. Now Joseph was a very handsome and well-built young man, and about this time Potiphar's wife began to desire him and invited him to sleep with her. But Joseph refused.
"Look,"
he told her,
"my master trusts me with everything in his entire household. No one here has more authority than I do. He has held back nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How could I ever do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God."
She kept putting pressure on him day after day, but he refused to sleep with her, and he kept out of her way as much as possible. One day, however, no one else was around when he was doing his work inside the house. She came and grabbed him by his shirt, demanding,
"Sleep with me."
Joseph tore himself away, but as he did, his shirt came off. She was left holding it as he ran from the house. When she saw that she had his shirt and that he had fled, she began screaming. Soon all the men around the place came running.
"My husband has brought this Hebrew slave here to insult us,"
she sobbed.
"He tried to rape me, but I screamed. He ran and left his shirt behind with me."
She kept the shirt with her, and when her husband came home that night, she told him her story.
"That Hebrew slave you've had around here tried to make a fool of me,"
she said.
"I was saved only by my screams. He ran out, leaving his shirt behind."
After hearing his wife's story, Potiphar was furious. He took Joseph and threw him into the prison where the king's prisoners were held. But the Lord was with Joseph there too, and he granted Joseph favor with the chief jailer. Before long, the jailer put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The chief jailer had no more worries after that because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him, making everything run smoothly and successfully. Chapter 40. Sometime later, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker offended him. Pharaoh became very angry with these officials, and he put them in the prison where Joseph was, in the palace of Potiphar, the captain of the guard. They remained in prison for quite some time, and Potiphar assigned Joseph to take care of them. One night the cupbearer and the baker each had a dream, and each dream had its own meaning. The next morning Joseph noticed the dejected look on their faces.
"Why do you look so worried today?"
he asked, and they replied,
"We both had dreams last night, but there's no one here to tell us what they mean."
"Interpreting dreams is God's business,"
Joseph replied.
"Tell me what you saw."
The cupbearer told his dream first.
"In my dream,"
he said,
"I saw a vine in front of me.
It had 3 branches that began to bud and blossom, and soon there were clusters of ripe grapes. I was holding Pharaoh's wine cup in my hand, so I took the grapes and squeezed the juice into it. Then I placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand.
I know what the dream means,
Joseph said.
The 3 branches mean 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will take you out of prison and return you to your position as his chief cupbearer. And please have some pity on me when you are back in his favor. Mention me to Pharaoh and ask him to let me out of here. For I was kidnapped from my homeland, the land of the Hebrews, and now I'm here in jail. But I did nothing to deserve it.
When the chief baker saw that the first dream had such a good meaning, he told his dream to Joseph too.
In my dream,
he said,
there were 3 baskets of pastries on my head. In the top basket were all kinds of bakery goods for Pharaoh, but the birds came and ate them.
I'll tell you what it means,
Joseph told him.
The 3 baskets mean 3 days. 3 days from now, Pharaoh will cut off your head and impale your body on a pole. Then birds will come and peck away at your flesh.
Pharaoh's birthday came 3 days later, and he gave a banquet for all his officials and household staff. He sent for his chief cupbearer and chief baker, and they were brought to him from the prison. He then restored the chief cupbearer to his former position, but he sentenced the chief baker to be impaled on a pole, just as Joseph had predicted. Pharaoh's cupbearer, however, promptly forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. Chapter 41. 2 years later, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing on the bank of the Nile River. In his dream, 7 fat, healthy-looking cows suddenly came up out of the river and began grazing along its bank. Then 7 other cows came up from the river, but these were very ugly and gaunt. These cows went over and stood beside the fat cows. Then the thin, ugly cows ate the fat ones. At this point in the dream, Pharaoh woke up. Soon he fell asleep again and had a second dream. This time he saw 7 heads of grain on one stalk, with every kernel well formed and plump. Then suddenly 7 more heads appeared on the stalk, but these were shriveled and withered by the east wind, and these thin heads swallowed up the 7 plump, well-formed heads. Then Pharaoh woke up again and realized it was a dream. The next morning, as he thought about it, Pharaoh became very concerned as to what the dreams might mean. So he called for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt and told them about his dreams. But not one of them could suggest what they meant. Then the king's cupbearer spoke up.
Today I have been reminded of my failure, he said. Some time ago you were angry with the chief baker and me, and you imprisoned us in the palace of the captain of the guard. One night the chief baker and I each had a dream, and each dream had a meaning. We told the dreams to a young Hebrew man who was a servant of the captain of the guard. He told us what each of our dreams meant, and everything happened just as he said it would. I was restored to my position as cupbearer, and the chief baker was executed and impaled on a pole.
Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once, and he was brought hastily from the dungeon. After a quick shave and change of clothes, he went in and stood in Pharaoh's presence.
I had a dream last night,
Pharaoh told him,
and none of these men can tell me what it means. But I have heard that you can interpret dreams, and that is why I have called for you.
It is beyond my power to do this,
Joseph replied.
But God will tell you what it means and will set you at ease.
So Pharaoh told him the dream.
I was standing on the bank of the Nile River. Suddenly, 7 fat, healthy-looking cows came up out of the river and began grazing along its bank. But then 7 other cows came up from the river. They were very thin and gaunt. In fact, I've never seen such ugly animals in all the land of Egypt. These thin, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat ones that had come out of the river first. But afterward they were still as ugly and gaunt as before. Then I woke up. A little later, I had another dream. This time there were 7 heads of grain on one stalk, and all 7 heads were plump and full. Then out of the same stalk came 7 withered heads, shriveled by the east wind, and the withered heads swallowed up the plump ones. I told these dreams to my magicians, but not one of them could tell me what they mean.
Both dreams mean the same thing,
Joseph told Pharaoh.
God was telling you what he is about to do. The 7 fat cows and the 7 plump heads of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. The 7 thin, ugly cows and the 7 withered heads of grain represent 7 years of famine. This will happen just as I have described it, for God has shown you what he is about to do. The next 7 years will be a period of great prosperity throughout the land of Egypt. But afterward there will be 7 years of famine so great that all the prosperity will be forgotten and wiped out. Famine will destroy the land. This famine will be so terrible that even the memory of the good years will be erased. As for having the dream twice, it means that the matter has been decreed by God and that he will make these events happen soon. My suggestion is that you find the wisest man in Egypt and put him in charge of a nationwide program. Let Pharaoh appoint officials over the land and let them collect 1/5 of all the crops during the 7 good years. Have them gather all the food and grain of these good years into the royal storehouses, and store it away so there will be food in the cities. That way there will be enough to eat when the 7 years of famine come. Otherwise, disaster will surely strike the land, and all the people will die.
Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his advisers. As they discussed who should be appointed for the job, Pharaoh said,
"Who could do it better than Joseph? For he's a man who is obviously filled with the Spirit of God."
Turning to Joseph, Pharaoh said,
"Since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, you are the wisest man in the land. I hereby appoint you to direct this project. You will manage my household and organize all my people. Only I will have a rank higher than yours."
And Pharaoh said to Joseph,
"I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt."
Then Pharaoh placed his own signet ring on Joseph's finger as a symbol of his authority. He dressed him in beautiful clothing, and placed the royal gold chain about his neck. Pharaoh also gave Joseph the chariot of his second-in-command, and wherever he went the command was shouted,
"Kneel down!"
So Joseph was put in charge of all Egypt, and Pharaoh said to Joseph,
"I am the king, but no one will move a hand or a foot in the entire land of Egypt without your approval."
Pharaoh renamed him Zaphanath-Paneah, and gave him a wife, a young woman named Asenath, the daughter of Potipherah, priest of Heliopolis. So Joseph took charge of the entire land of Egypt. He was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And when Joseph left Pharaoh's presence, he made a tour of inspection throughout the land. And sure enough, for the next 7 years there were bumper crops everywhere. During those years Joseph took a portion of all the crops grown in Egypt and stored them for the government in nearby cities. After 7 years the granaries were filled to overflowing. There was so much grain, like sand on the seashore, that the people could not keep track of the amount. During this time, before the arrival of the first of the famine years, 2 sons were born to Joseph and his wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potipherah, priest of Heliopolis. Joseph named his older son Manasseh, for he said,
God has made me forget all my troubles and the family of my father.
Joseph named his second son Ephraim, for he said,
God has made me fruitful in this land of my suffering.
At last the 7 years of plenty came to an end. Then the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had predicted. There were crop failures in all the surrounding countries too, but in Egypt there was plenty of grain in the storehouses. Throughout the land of Egypt the people began to starve. They pleaded with Pharaoh for food, and he told them,
"Go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you."
So with severe famine everywhere in the land, Joseph opened up the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. And people from surrounding lands also came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe throughout the world.